Salt does not shout, it does not move, and yet it transforms everything it touches. In life, it is not always the loudest force that shifts your reality, but the quiet disciplines you keep in sacred places. Let us pause here. Have you ever walked into a space and instantly felt the weight of something that wasn't spoken, but was present? That is energy, and energy has memory, not only in rooms, but in people, in objects, in gestures, in habits. And when you begin to consciously place salt in key places of your home, you're not performing a superstition. You are performing a reminder, a sacred signal to your mind, to your nervous system, and to your soul. I am the keeper of peace here. I invite in what nourishes. I release what pollutes. There's an ancient belief that salt, when placed at the entrance of a home, has the power to purify, protect, and preserve. It does not create noise. It doesn't force its presence. Yet, its effect is unmistakable. In its simplicity lies its strength. Just as a small pinch of salt can transform the taste of a meal, a small shift in how we protect the entrance to our inner life, our mind, our emotions, our relationships, can change the whole flavor of our human experience. Think of the doorway of your home. It's a threshold, a place between what is inside and what is outside. In many cultures, salt is placed there not because of superstition, but because of intention. It reminds us that every space we dwell in, physical or emotional, must have boundaries. The front door is where energy either enters to nourish or invades to disrupt. What we allow to cross that line over time determines not only the peace of our household, but the clarity of our own soul. There is a story from a small village in the mountains of Sichuan. An elderly woman, known for her wisdom and peace, would place a small bowl of salt at her door every morning before sunrise. When asked why, she smiled and said, "Because every day brings winds from the outside. Not all of them are meant to settle here." That salt became her silent sentinel, a way to remind herself that though she cannot control the winds, she can control what enters her home. When we speak of boundaries, especially in the context of relationships, it is often misunderstood. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They don't prevent love, they preserve it. Just as salt preserves food from decay, boundaries preserve our emotional and spiritual well-being. The nervous system, particularly the reticular activating system in the brainstem, serves a similar function. It decides what sensory information is worth your attention and what should be ignored. When we lack boundaries in relationships, it is as if this internal filter is damaged. We allow in everything, every word, every mood, every projection from another person, until we are overwhelmed. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt completely drained, even though the person had not said anything overtly aggressive or cruel? That is often not the result of what was said, but of what was allowed to enter repeatedly, unfiltered. Every sigh, every rolling of the eyes, every subtle criticism, like 1,000 grains of salt dissolving in your emotional body, can eventually overwhelm your peace. To place salt at the door is not only symbolic, it is a conscious act of returning to self-awareness. There is a quiet form of emotional discipline in choosing what we allow ourselves to absorb. Just as one would not allow a stranger to walk into their home and rearrange the furniture, we should not allow every emotional turbulence from others to rearrange our internal state. There is strength in standing still, in protecting the entrance to our energy with grace, not aggression. We must ask, who do we allow in? And on what terms? Do we open the door just because someone knocks? Or do we ask if their presence is nourishing or draining, if their energy is aligned or chaotic? In relationships, many people confuse kindness with availability, but availability without discernment becomes vulnerability. Emotional openness is a gift, but without salt, without boundaries, it invites erosion. The erosion of self-respect, the erosion of emotional clarity, the erosion of peace. A woman once came to me and said, "Master, I don't understand. I give so much in my relationships. I listen, I care, I love deeply. But I always feel like people take advantage of me." I asked her, "When you open your door, do you first ask if the person brings peace or pain? Do you listen to the tone of their footsteps, the intention behind their smile, or do you simply welcome them in because you fear being alone?" She was silent. Loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes, it is the absence of boundaries. When you let everyone in, even those who carry chaos, you may be surrounded, but never connected. You may be loved, but not respected. You may be available, but never truly seen. Place salt at your doorway, not to keep people out, but to teach yourself to pause, to breathe, to ask, is this energy meant for me? To protect your emotional and spiritual integrity. When you do this, something powerful happens. You begin to sense the difference between connection and obligation, between healthy intimacy and silent manipulation. You begin to feel what it means to be in a space that supports your growth rather than one that drains it. And you begin to carry this awareness into every relationship, romantic, familial, professional. You become the gatekeeper of your own energy, not with hostility, but with honor. This transforms not only how others treat you, but how you treat yourself. It sharpens your emotional perception. You start recognizing patterns in others, noticing when someone's presence dims your light, even if their words are sweet. You begin to identify manipulation not through what is said, but through how you feel when you're around them. This is not magic. This is emotional intelligence. This is the result of standing guard at your own doorway. Now shift your awareness to another place in the home, the corners. Have you ever noticed how dust gathers in the corners of a room, no matter how often you clean? The corners, neglected and quiet, become receptacles for what no longer serves. In the same way, the corners of our lives, the forgotten conversations, the lingering emotions, the unspoken resentments, can become filled with energetic debris. Salt placed in the corners is not about superstition. It is about sweeping away what the mind avoids. It is about clarity. Eastern traditions often speak of Kwai, the vital life force that flows through all living things. When Kwai stagnates, the body suffers. Muscles stiffen, the mind fogs. Relationships turn sour. In traditional Chinese medicine, stagnation is seen as the root of many ailments, not just physical but emotional. Resentment, regret, guilt, these are the dust of the spirit. And just as salt absorbs moisture, it also symbolizes the absorption and transmutation of emotional weight. Salt in the corners serves as a ritual of renewal. It asks you to look not only at what is central in your life, but at what is pushed to the sides. The small things you keep avoiding, the silent griefs you never speak of, the conversations you never finish, the apologies you never give, the forgiveness you withhold, not just from others, but from yourself. There was once a monk who said to his student, "Before you meditate, sweep the temple. Before you pray, clean the floor. Before you chant, wash your bowl." The student asked, "Why must I clean before I seek wisdom?" The monk replied, "Because wisdom cannot enter a cluttered space. Cleanliness is not for the room. It is for your mind." Many relationships fail not because of what is done in the center, but because of what is ignored in the corners. The quiet disconnections, the slow buildup of unspoken discomfort, the subtle ways we withdraw without words. A marriage may have beautiful moments at the surface, anniversaries, vacations, shared meals. But if emotional stagnation has gathered in the corners, the atmosphere becomes heavy. Conversations lose their spark, intimacy becomes duty, and connection begins to fade like sunlight in a dusty room. When you place salt in the corners of your home, you are saying, "I will no longer ignore what is pushed aside." It is a practice of intentional presence, a way of saying, "Let me clean up the inner atmosphere." From a psychological perspective, this mirrors the practice of mental hygiene, recognizing emotional clutter and addressing it before it becomes a pattern. A man once told me, "Master, I don't know why I feel angry all the time. My life is good. My job is fine. My family loves me." I asked him, "When was the last time you sat in silence and swept the corners of your inner room?" He looked puzzled. I explained, "Anger often arises not because something is wrong now, but because something old was never processed. Your mind may have moved on, but your body remembers. Your emotions remember. Emotions, like water, always seek expression. If blocked, they stagnate. If denied, they ferment. When you feel irritation, moodiness, or heaviness without reason, it may not be random. It may be residue. Just as a room with clean furniture can still feel dirty if the corners are untouched, a life with achievements can still feel incomplete if old emotions remain neglected. Salt is crystalline in structure. It reflects light, refracts clarity. And when we bring salt into the corners of our life, we do the same. We reflect on what we've ignored. We bring clarity where there was haze. Neuroscience supports this. showing that unprocessed emotional experiences can remain active in the brain's limbic system, triggering subtle but persistent stress responses. Over time, this leads to emotional fatigue, reactivity, even illness. But awareness changes the chemistry. Presence rewires the brain. This is not philosophy. This is physiology. In relationship dynamics, emotional stagnation shows up as repetition. The same argument, the same cold silence, the same misunderstanding. When you see this pattern, understand the corner is calling you. Something has been left there. A hurt you pretended didn't matter. A need you never expressed. A boundary you abandoned for the sake of harmony. But harmony that requires silence is not peace. It is suppression. And suppression, like hidden dust, always resurfaces. You may clean your home weekly, but do you clean your heart? You may air out your rooms, but do you air out your disappointments? Emotional stagnation does not always come from great betrayal. Sometimes it comes from years of small denials. Moments when you needed to speak, but swallowed your truth. Moments when you needed to cry, but smiled instead. Moments when you needed to walk away, but stayed because it was easier. Salt reminds us that true purification begins with awareness, and awareness begins with stillness. Before you clean the corners of your home, you must first sit still enough to notice where the dust has gathered. This is why presence is so important. In relationships, we often speak but rarely listen. We hear but do not feel. We see but do not observe. Stillness gives birth to attention, and attention gives birth to understanding. If you were to place salt in the four corners of your room tonight, let it be with intention. Let each handful represent something you are ready to face. One corner for the words left unsaid, another for the feelings pushed away, another for the expectations that were never fair to begin with, and the last for the forgiveness you owe yourself. Sit with it. Let the ritual be a meditation, a commitment to emotional clarity, because it is in the corners that the soul speaks softly. And only those who sit long enough in silence will hear. There are many ways to cleanse a space, but the intention behind the action often determines its true power. Salt, in its simplicity, does not demand our belief, but it responds to it. In Eastern philosophy, when a tool is used consciously, it becomes a bridge between the material and the immaterial. To place salt under your bed is not just an act of physical placement, it is a declaration. It says, I invite clarity into my inner world. The bed is where the body returns to stillness, and where the unconscious rises to speak. It is the most vulnerable place in a home, because it holds your silence, and anything that holds your silence must also hold your energy. When salt is placed under the bed with intention, it becomes more than a mineral, it becomes a guardian. And why do we need guardians during sleep? Because sleep is not merely rest, it is repair. It is the time when the body rewires emotions, consolidates memory, and digests unresolved energies. Neuroscience shows us that during REM sleep, the brain revisits difficult emotional experiences in a safe simulation. This is how we process trauma and confusion. But if the space under the bed is dense, cluttered, dusty, or spiritually stagnant, then the energetic environment we sleep in may interrupt that process. And this is something many people do not understand. Your environment either supports your healing or resists it. I once met a woman who struggled with chronic fatigue. No matter how many hours she slept, she woke up exhausted. Her doctors had no explanation. When she visited a monastery in the mountains to find peace, she was given a single instruction by the abbot. Clean under your bed and place salt in each corner. Do this for 30 days, then we will talk. She was skeptical but followed the advice. After 3 nights, she began to sleep more deeply. After 3 weeks, her dreams became vivid and insightful. By the end of the month, her fatigue lifted. When she returned to the abbot, he said only, your body knew what it needed. It just needed you to listen. In relationships, many of our wounds are not created during waking hours. They are amplified during sleep. We carry into sleep what we suppress during the day. If you feel unseen in your relationship, you may wake in the night with a racing heart and no memory of a dream. If you feel unworthy, your nervous system will struggle to regulate into deep rest. In this way, the emotional tension of the day echoes through the night, and when the space beneath your bed holds unresolved clutter, it amplifies that tension. From a physiological perspective, the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for alertness and vigilance, can remain activated during light sleep if the environment does not feel safe. People often underestimate how deeply the brain scans its surroundings, even in unconscious states. This is why a well-maintained sleep space matters. Cleanliness is not just aesthetic, it is neurological. Salt, in this context, acts like a grounding agent. Its crystalline structure stabilizes the energy of a room. It absorbs emotional residue, just like the mind tries to. And when it does so, your mind is freed to rest. There is a practice in traditional Eastern homes. Before a couple goes to bed after an argument, one of them places salt under the bed in silence. It is not discussed. It is not dramatic. It is a silent act of energetic apology, not to erase the pain, but to create space for stillness to do what words cannot. When the ego does not know how to say sorry, energy can speak instead. And this is the wisdom we forget in relationships. Not everything must be said aloud. Sometimes, what heals is the intention behind the silence. A couple who had been married for 40 years once told me that their secret to peace was simple. We never go to sleep with a mess under the bed. They laughed, but when I asked them what they really meant, the wife said, "Salt doesn't fix problems, but it shows that someone still cares enough to hold space for healing." When one partner places salt under the bed, they are saying, "I want us to rest without chaos between us." It's not a magic ritual, it's a symbol of willingness. Now let us turn to the fourth placement, the front entrance. If the bed is the realm of inward healing, the entrance is the boundary of outward connection. It is the point where energy enters and leaves, where intentions cross thresholds, where your private world meets the world outside. In traditional cultures, doorways are never neutral. They are sacred liminal spaces, transitional, alive and sensitive. This is why salt at the entrance is not superstition. It is energetic awareness. In psychology, we understand that a person's sense of safety is often tied to their perception of thresholds, places of transition. A doorway is not just a physical frame. It is symbolic of beginnings and endings. People who live in environments where the entrance is chaotic, cluttered, unwelcoming, or energetically open, often experience anxiety, irritability, or lack of direction. Why? Because the brain interprets the entrance as the start of every experience. It sets the tone. And this is especially true in relationships. Imagine returning home after a long day. You reach your front door and are greeted by confusion, dirt, or the remnants of yesterday's neglect. Even if the rest of your home is peaceful, your nervous system has already received a signal. This space is not sacred. And so, your body prepares for vigilance instead of relaxation. Salt at the entrance reverses this signal. It declares, this space has boundaries. It teaches the body to exhale. In a story shared by a Zen teacher in Kyoto, a newly couple struggled to communicate. The husband, raised in a busy, emotionally distant household, would often return home silently and retreat to the back of the house. The wife, feeling rejected, withdrew emotionally. After weeks of silence, her teacher advised her to place a small bowl of salt near the front door and to clean the threshold every morning, not to change him. The teacher said, but to make the entrance a space of welcome. Within days, the husband paused more often at the door. Within weeks, he began to greet her before walking in. She did not speak about the salt, but the space changed him. When we place salt at the entrance, we are not just protecting ourselves from negative energy. We are inviting sacred presence into our connections. We are saying, every time someone enters this space, let it be with clarity, peace, and mutual respect. From a neurological standpoint, routines associated with entering a home, like cleaning shoes, bowing slightly, or noticing a symbol of peace, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. The body recognizes these cues as safety. Salt becomes a subtle reminder. It is not the salt itself that changes us, but our willingness to be mindful in its presence. In relationships, the threshold also symbolizes the emotional gateway. How do you let people into your life? Are your boundaries reactive or intentional? When someone crosses into your world, do they feel your stillness or your chaos? Salt at the entrance is a mirror. It reminds you that you get to choose the tone with which you greet others. And even more profoundly, it reminds you that how you enter your own home reflects how you enter your own heart. There was a man who lived alone for years. After a difficult divorce, he shut his heart and home to connection. His entrance became cluttered with packages, shoes, and unspoken grief. One day, after attending a retreat, he was asked to perform one task: clear the entrance, place a small dish of salt, and walk in with reverence. At first, he laughed. But something inside him softened. The next morning, he entered his home slowly, noticing the quiet, the light. He began to clear the space daily. And one evening, as he stepped inside, he felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from the sudden awareness of presence. That was the beginning of his healing. In both relationships and solitude, the space we create at the entrance of our lives reflects the state of our soul. If you open your home with resentment, then even love that knocks cannot enter freely. If you open with fear, then even joy will hesitate. But when you open with stillness, when you choose to purify that space, even with something as humble as salt, then the entire energy of your relationships shifts. People feel safer, conversations soften, defenses drop. And this is not metaphysics, it is human behavior. When someone feels invited, they open. When someone senses boundaries, they respect. When someone crosses a threshold that has been prepared with care, their heart leans toward gratitude. Salt does not command this reaction, but the intention behind placing it does. In the Tao Te Ching, it is written, "The softest thing in the universe overcomes the hardest." This includes the small choices we make, quietly, without needing to be seen. Placing salt under the bed is soft. Placing it at the entrance is softer still. And yet, in their subtlety, these actions shape how we love, how we rest, how we let go. In this way, every corner of the home becomes not a place to hide, but a space to be deeply seen. There is a quiet space in every home that people walk by without noticing, a corner, tucked away, often overlooked, rarely touched. And yet, it is in these forgotten places that energy settles. Just as in the corners of our hearts lie the emotions we didn't want to face, in the corners of our rooms gather the remnants of yesterday's chaos. Dust, stagnant air, old thoughts, they all find a way to rest where we do not look. And so, when you place salt in the corners of your home, you are not merely engaging in a ritual. You are making a profound statement: nothing in my life will be left unattended. Relationships suffer when we leave things unspoken. A quiet disappointment, a misunderstood silence, a moment when one partner needed reassurance but received distance instead. These emotional remnants do not disappear, they hide. And just like dust in the corner of a room, they accumulate until one day they become visible. Placing salt in the corners of your space teaches you to become mindful of these hidden emotions. The practice is not about perfection, it's about presence. You are saying, I am willing to acknowledge what has been left behind. In Taoist tradition, the corners of a home are where qi, the life energy, can become stuck. If the energy doesn't flow freely, it can begin to decay, creating unease, conflict, or fatigue. In the same way, when a relationship is full of moments that go unprocessed, words never said, affection withheld, gratitude forgotten, the qi between two people becomes stagnant. You may still go through the motions, eat together, sleep beside each other, but you are no longer alive together. Placing salt in the corners is a symbolic act of moving energy, of waking up the parts of your relationship that have fallen asleep. I once visited the home of a couple who had been together for over 20 years. Their house was immaculately clean. The floor shone, the furniture was arranged with care, but the energy was heavy. Something felt stuck. As I walked through their living room, I noticed the corners had dust, cobwebs, and remnants of incense long burned. We clean everything, the wife said, but we always forget the corners. It was a metaphor for their marriage. They dealt with the obvious issues, but ignored the quiet tensions, the subtle hurts, the small betrayals of trust that they had never revisited. I asked them to begin placing salt in each corner of their main rooms every week, and each time they did, to name something they had left unspoken. The change was not immediate, but over time the salt became their ritual of reconnection. She would say, I felt alone last week when you didn't listen. He would say, I wanted to hold you, but I didn't know if you wanted me to. They stopped pretending that unspoken things didn't matter, and in doing so, they brought light into the emotional corners of their relationship. From a scientific perspective, salt absorbs moisture and energy. It cleanses by attracting. In the same way, when we bring attention to the neglected spaces in our relationships, we absorb pain. not to hold on to it, but to transform it. Attention is the first act of healing. When you place salt in the corners of your room, do it slowly, with intention. Let your body feel what you've forgotten. Let your heart recall what was silenced. A woman once told me that after a painful breakup, she placed salt in all 4 corners of her bedroom, not because I believed it would bring him back. She said, but because I needed to reclaim the parts of myself I had given away. Every morning, she would sweep it up and replace it. Each grain was like a word she never said, a truth she never honored, a promise she made to herself that she was now keeping. In relationships, we often clean what is visible. We say sorry for the big things. We show up on anniversaries. We remember birthdays. But what about the silent corners? The days when we forgot to ask how the other person was doing. The moments when we chose pride over presence. The small betrayals of not listening, not noticing, not being there. These things do not leave the space. They settle in the corners. Salt in these places acts as a reminder we must bring light to what we ignore. And in doing so, we become whole again. Now let us turn to the 6th and final placement, within the kitchen, the heart of the home, the place where nourishment is prepared, where transformation happens. From raw ingredients, meals are created. From hunger, fulfillment. And so the kitchen is not just a space of utility, it is sacred. It is the spiritual center of a household. Placing salt here is not about cleansing, it is about blessing. In many ancient cultures, salt was the currency of value. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt, giving birth to the word salary. Salt preserves, purifies, and seasons. It makes blandness flavorful. It makes perishable things last longer. In the same way, relationships that are seasoned with intention become resilient. They do not rot in conflict. They do not grow dull with time. They retain their depth because they are preserved by the invisible ingredient of care. When you place salt in the kitchen, you are reminding yourself that everything you feed yourself and those you love is energy. Food is not neutral. It carries memory. It carries intention. A meal cooked with resentment tastes different than one cooked with love. And the person who receives it feels the difference, even if they cannot name it. Salt becomes the symbol of sacred attention. It says, this nourishment matters. This space matters. The people I serve matter. A young woman once told me the story of her grandmother who, even in her 90s, insisted on cooking every meal for the family. Her hands were slow, but her movements were filled with presence. Before cooking, she would place a pinch of salt in a small bowl beside the stove. Not for the food, she said, but for the energy. She believed that the salt absorbed any bitterness, anger, or sadness she may unconsciously bring into the act of cooking. You don't just cook with your hands, she'd say, you cook with your spirit. Her family swore that her food healed them, not because of any ingredient, but because of the presence she carried. When she passed, her granddaughter took the same bowl and continued the tradition. Each time she places the salt beside the stove, she is not just remembering her grandmother, she is channeling a legacy of mindful love. Modern science now acknowledges what many ancient cultures knew: the emotional state of a person influences their output. Emotions affect heart rate variability, digestive enzymes, and even taste perception. A cook in a state of gratitude produces a different energetic frequency than one in stress. And this is not spiritual theory, it is physiology. Our bodies respond to intention. In relationships, we often overlook the kitchen as a space of connection. But think about it, how many moments of true intimacy happen not in the bedroom, but in the kitchen? Preparing coffee in the morning, sharing leftovers at night, talking while stirring a pot. These are not grand gestures, but they are sacred, and they can be either forgotten or honored. Placing salt in the kitchen invites mindfulness into these everyday moments. It reminds you to be aware of what you are bringing into the nourishment of others. Are you feeding your loved ones food mixed with emotional exhaustion? Are you serving meals while resenting the role you've taken on? Or are you offering presence, even if it's imperfect? One husband, frustrated by the growing distance between him and his wife, began placing a small dish of salt near the stove each time he cooked. He did not tell her why, but he told himself, each time I prepare food, I will let go of my complaints. I will infuse this moment with the love I have forgotten how to show. Weeks passed, she began to soften. He began to feel joy again in the act of service. The salt didn't fix their problems, but it transformed his presence, and that, in turn, transformed the relationship. Relationships are nourished or starved in the daily rituals, not in the arguments, not in the grand reconciliations, but in the unnoticed choices. The tone of your voice while handing over a plate, the way you look at someone when they walk into the room, the energy with which you stir a spoon. Placing salt in the kitchen is a vow. Let me be conscious of what I am feeding. There is a Zen teaching. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It reminds us that spirituality is not in escape. It is in return. Return to the task. Return to the moment. Return to the relationship. When you place salt in your kitchen, you are not escaping the routine. You are sanctifying it. And so, the corner of the kitchen where salt quietly rests becomes more than just a space. It becomes a prayer that says, may what I prepare be an offering. May my hands carry no bitterness. May this food nourish more than the body. May it nourish the bond. And whether that food is received with gratitude or indifference is not the point. The point is your presence, your offering. When you bring intention into the act of nourishment, you reclaim the sacredness of love. Because love, at its deepest, is service without resentment. It is giving, not because you must, but because you choose to. It is showing up fully, even in the smallest acts. Placing salt in the kitchen helps anchor that intention. It's not magic, it's mindfulness. And in a world where relationships often falter due to neglect of the mundane, returning presence to the act of nourishment can be revolutionary. It reminds us that love lives not in the drama, but in the detail. And so, as the salt rests quietly by the stove, it does not demand attention, but it shapes it. Like all sacred things, its power is in its humility. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle, it just is, constant, present, transformative, just like love when given freely.